Hey everyone, sorry about the delay to this episode. If you live in South Australia, you'll know that on Saturday we had massive storms that blacked out most of the state, and I haven't had power since Saturday. It is now Tuesday. So I haven't been able to upload because I've only been able to charge my laptop at work. And then I just recorded this intro and somehow managed to delete every single edit I've made. So happy days. But anyway, please enjoy my chat with Dr Erinn-Fagan Jeffries for part 2 of Alien. Welcome to Type 1 Error, the podcast where we look at the scientific fact or fiction behind your favorite sci-fi pop culture. My name is Natalie. My pronouns are she, they. And today we're welcoming back again Dr. Erinn-Fagan Jeffries to talk about Alien.
Hey, Natalie.
How's it going?
Yeah, good. Nice sunny day today, so I'm
It is
enjoying
nice.
life.
Yes. We'll finally have a bit of sun and it will disappear again in half an hour, I'm sure. So last time we talked about the juvenile life stages of the xenomorph, which was the egg, the face hugger, the chest and the chest burster. So today I was hoping we could talk about the adult phase and the queen life stage, as well as how that seems to fit into their general morphology and ecology, and especially how that works with the host.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got my trusty notebook again to look at things. What were your thoughts on the adult as an insect, or do you think it sort of diverged a bit from that life cycle that we saw earlier? If that makes sense.
I mean, it definitely has a hard outer body, right? So it looks insecty, or at least in the phylum Arthropoda, the arthropods, things like insects, but also, spiders and crustaceans and centipedes and scorpions. They've all got their exoskeleton on the outside, and the xenomorph definitely looks like it's, got that shiny, hard outer body that would make it fit into that group if we were trying to force it into our classifications of living things.
Yeah. I was wondering about why it's a very internal skeleton looking exterior, which seems a bit strange because, you can see this very well defined rib cage,
Mm-hmm.
but no organs. From what I thought, it looked like it was a very, very skinny organism or something that was designed with no muscle. So almost like how apparently it's a problem in visualizing dinosaurs and recreating extinct fauna of not knowing where the muscle is sort of fitting around the skeleton. Hey, if you're interested in dinosaurs, check out the very first episode with Ash Turner where we talk about Jurassic Park. So they're literally skin and bone. So you think it is an exoskeleton?
Well, I guess it looks hard and shiny, right? I
Yeah.
can't remember the movie well enough. Do we ever see one like cut open or ever see the insides of it?
Ooh. Not that I know of, but I feel like actually all the adults and the queens have sort of just been like blown up and you don't really
Yes.
see them. And I feel like maybe the queen lost a limb and it was sort of snappy, or it
Mm-hmm.
snapped rather than was very gooey. So I don't know, maybe it's a very dehydrated, muscleless thing.
Yeah, I don't know.
I did notice that the adult has a very long tail and it's got these weird protruding bits on its back. Any thoughts? We don't really see insects with tails, so
No, I mean, we
the
see
springtail.
lots of different appendages on arthropods. So, we see things like scorpions having developed a a long tail that's used for defense with a stinger at the end. I guess we see
Hmm.
things like wasps having stingers or ovipositors at the end. Yeah, so there's definitely arthropods that have grown appendages other than the legs and use them
Hmm.
for defense or for stability or for all sorts of different things. If you've ever seen a whip spider or a whip scorpion, they've got
No, I
some
haven't.
they've got some really cool, the long arms at the front that we
Hmm.
see. Well, they're not technically arms, but the long appendages at the front that have kind of grown crazily long. So yeah, we definitely see scorpions with lots of different long appendages other than the legs. But I
Right.
guess
Okay.
we don't see like a traditional tail like in a kangaroo or a dog.
Yeah. Is that more because a traditional tail is more used for balance, and that's not really an issue so much with small organisms if they're I'm just spitballing.
Yeah, I guess it's
If you know what I
the
mean? Like there's not that much to stabilize because they already have a very low center of gravity, I guess.
yeah, I mean that traditional tail we think of in mammals evolved with the vertebrate group, and that's kind of a very different evolution from something like a scorpion tail. But tricky to know what the alien uses it for in the movies.
Yeah, I feel like there is a scene where it's using its tail to sting like a scorpion,
Hmm.
or not even sting, but like it's got a very pointed blade like appendage on the end that I think attacks Ripley at some point
Hmm.
because she's fighting all the teeth and then
Yeah,
suddenly the tail comes.
yeah, which is
Um,
very kind of evocative of a scorpion, right? With
mm,
that tail that it can, they use their pincers at the front to be able to hold the prey and use that tail to bend around and inject a venom.
I'm wondering how its hands work because it's got these claws, but they don't seem very functional. They sort of look a bit more like it's just they got like a manicure because they're like really long and pointed but don't seem very usable.
It definitely uses its arms to climb, right? Because it's very agile and mobile. So I guess it definitely has the ability to hold on to things and with enough force to propel its body upwards.
I did notice that the adult seems very humanoid,
Yeah, it
which is a bit
definitely
unsettling.
you get that upright posture, right? Which we normally
Yeah.
only see at least on Earth, in invertebrates and things like primates and humans.
Yes, like it's biped, and I was also looking at pictures, and it's also like walks plantigrade as
Hmm.
well, like humans. So then I started going, oh, I wonder if this is like a derived human. But I think it's probably more likely to be some kind of convergent evolution because that life
Yeah,
cycle is so whack. It's probably an accident that
yeah.
the adult ended up looking a bit like a human.
Or it's getting traits from the host, right? Because we see that in some of the later movies that you
Yes.
get, the one that attacked the dog then has traits from the dog. So I guess it's tricky to separate host from what the original phenotype would have been.
Yeah, and I guess we do see like some very rapid adaptation as well. That would make sense. So last time we talked a bit about whether it appears to be host specific or if it just parasitizes general mammals.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering if it might have a sort of long term codependence on humans, and maybe that's why over time it looks similar to a human.
Yeah, it's definitely not host specific to mammals, only because when in that very first scene where they go into the abandoned ship in the first movie, and we see that very kind of ancient alien that obviously had a chest burster come out of it. And, that
I
thing is,
forgot about that.
definitely not from Earth and definitely not human or dog or mammal. So it definitely was able to parasitize that. So
Mm.
seems to be able to be very generalist in its
That is good. Yeah.
yeah.
I totally forgot about that first alien victim, the alien that was.
Yes, and the like crashed
Yes.
spaceship that was on the planet.
It'd be really cool if they went more into that as well. The original, oh, that would be a better spin-off, I think, than.
Yeah, yeah. Where did that original alien race come from?
Yeah,
And have they
exactly.
been completely wiped out by the xenomorphs or
Yeah,
Okay,
and you
yeah.
could have follow this whole story and you're like, "Wow, this is so exciting," but you know that it's gonna end with everyone dying and then it will come full circle back to the alien, which is cool. Alright, so we've solved one problem then. We've worked out it's not really host specific, but it does resemble a human in its general biped nature and sort of 4 limbs and like a head with, I wanna say brain, like a big brain.
Which is kind of an interesting point, right? Because often we associate, like when we are looking at ancient humanoids on Earth, the size of their head capacity, of the skull capacity as to what the size of their brains may have been and what that may mean for their intelligence. And I'm definitely not a
Mhm.
anthropologist or someone who studies ancient humans or ancient human relatives. But if you look at the xenomorph's head, it's gigantic, right? So it would give that assumption that maybe there's a very intelligent creature inside. And reading some of the stories from the original writings, that was part of the original conception, that this thing would be something very intelligent with a very evolved social structure. And some of that, I think, definitely got lost as the movie developed. And
For
in the
sure.
final product, we get something that's a lot more monster scary and less very intelligent alien race. But that
Yeah.
big head capacity definitely would possibly mean it has a large brain inside. If it has a brain and a neural system that we are used to, I guess it could be
Mm.
completely different.
Yeah, also comes into how do we define
Yes,
intelligence,
yeah, yeah. Is intelligence,
which is it closer to us that makes it more
yeah,
intelligent?
yeah. Or is it being able to keep your species alive, which it's very effective at. So
Yeah, and we're doing a bad job at it. So
yeah.
I agree that there was the evidence sort of seems to suggest that they wanted to do a very intelligent species with this big brain and things, but I don't think that really is given much afterthought when they made the movie, because the only sort of intelligent things I can put my that I can name is its survival skills, how it creeps up on them in the second movie and sort of ambushes them.
Yes, yeah. So there's definitely that ability to forward plan and think about actions and consequences and reactions, which is, I guess, present in lots of different animals and in humans, when there are lots of animals that are hunters and predators and they have to have that ability to be able to stalk prey effectively,
Mm,
but we don't necessarily then class them with like human grade intelligence either.
yeah, I mean, I think it took a lot of guts for humans to even say, dolphins might be smarter than us. I was going to say as well, in the second one, they have, I can't remember the character's name, insert character's name here in editing. They have the new android or artificial human
Hmm.
or whatever it was. And while the aliens are trying to kill them, he is turning on or destroying the atmospheric controller thing to try and blow up the whole thing. And the aliens aren't really onto that at all. They're only focused on the prey.
Mm, yeah.
So it could be like a very specific hunting intelligence, but maybe not very general intelligence. Which I'm thinking about praying mantids
Hmm.
now. Have you seen or read about that study where they put 3D glasses on praying mantids to try and work out how they judge depth perception?
No, I haven't, but it sounds really interesting.
This research was by Dr. Vivek Nityananda from Newcastle University, UK, and it's so interesting. I'll put a link in the show notes to the seminar where he talks about this. Yeah, it was really cool. For a subject, we had to listen to some seminars, and I was looking at cool seminars and found this one on mantids. And yeah, they wanted to work out how they judged motion and prey. Yeah, they would change perceived striking distance with the mantid. And they also looked at if you had like a dot that changed color, would they detect a color change as movement, or does it have to physically move? Or if you had, 6 or so circles with the optical illusion that there is a light moving between all the
Mhm.
circles, does that get picked up as motion or not really? It was really interesting anyway. I was wondering as well, since we were talking about our xenomorph as an insect or as an arthropod, one of the, I guess, practical limitations of the exoskeleton, do you know how large an exoskeleton can support an organism until it's not really viable anymore?
Yeah, so I guess there's a few limitations which stop how big arthropods can get. Part of it is that support system, and so the bigger you get, the heavier you're going to get. So your limbs have to be able to support that, and in the case of arthropods, the exoskeleton has to be able to support that. That's probably part of the reason that now we find our biggest arthropods in the ocean. So things like
Mhm,
giant crabs and stuff, because by spending a lot of time in the water, their bodies are supported.
mhm,
But then the other limitation is about getting oxygen through into the body. So most arthropods, they don't have the same kind of oxygen intake we do. So we breathe in oxygen into our lungs, and then it spreads out using a bunch of veins and through our blood system to transport that oxygen all over the body. Arthropods are a lot more dependent on diffusion of that oxygen, sort of just through their cells. So they breathe mostly through spiracles or book lungs, where the oxygen then has to kind of permeate through the body. And so the bigger you get, you're sort of exponentially increasing how far that oxygen has to transport, like from the outside to get all the way to like the bit of your body in the middle of you, which is part of the reason there's that theory that the reason we used to see really much bigger dragonflies and stuff,
mhm.
a long time ago on Earth's history is because that oxygen content was higher, along with a whole bunch of other reasons, but that's one of them.
Yep,
Yeah, so there's limitations about how it actually gets the air it needs to breathe into it. And yes, the bigger you get, the less able that chitin exoskeleton is able to support the
yep.
internal structures.
So spiracles are the little holes, right?
Yeah, yeah. So there are
Yeah.
things
Are
found.
they over the whole body or are they mainly on like the abdomen
Yeah,
or
in
something?
insects, they're mostly on the abdomen because that's where I guess all the kind of guts of the insect are. So
Yeah.
where we see, the food processing in the stomach and the egg production in females and all that kind of stuff. So the air going in
Mm.
there gets straight to all the important stuff first and then spreads through
So,
to things like the wing and the leg muscles in the thorax and up to the
yeah.
brain and neuro processes.
So if it's like a sort of surface area to volume ratio and you're relying on diffusion, does that mean that you could theoretically have a larger organism that's very, very thin, and therefore has a really high surface area so that the spiracles would allow better oxygen to more effectively
Mhm.
permeate through the body, but that would be requiring it to be very slender.
Yeah,
In which
possibly.
case, maybe the xenomorph could be doing that because it looks so skinny and
Yeah,
it
yeah.
doesn't have
Yeah.
muscle.
Very long and spindly, and which also I guess helps with weight, right? Because if you're long and skinny, those joints and those appendages are less heavy and more able to be supported by the exoskeleton structure, which is what we see in one of the biggest arthropods. I think is something called a Japanese spider crab.
Oh,
I think that's right.
yeah.
They're really big, and if you Google it, the top image is always the same image of this guy like holding it with the legs out. But it actually has quite a small like carapace, and it's the legs which
Mhm.
are really long and skinny and give it all that size.
Legs for
Yeah.
days. I guess we're assuming that because it has a rib cage, it therefore has lungs, but it could be something else. Or
Yeah.
maybe it uses a combined system of like spiracles and lungs. Cause I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just
I don't
guessing.
know. Could be.
We'll never know.
We
Um,
need a an autopsy.
yeah, I guess also because the xenomorph has what looks like vertebrae, that it has like a very high surface area of just sort of knobbly
Uh-huh.
stuff everywhere. So that could give it another shot at oxygen, I guess. Maybe it doesn't need that much oxygen if it's more of an ambush predator, because it does seem to hide for quite a
Yeah.
while and be very stealthy and then sneak out. And also because its feet being biped and its feet plantigrade, it didn't really look like it was very well adapted to running.
Mhm.
But like the climbing and sort of rapid ambush, I reckon it could be like an ambush predator.
Mm. And I guess we never really find out what atmospheres it's able to support, right? Like it can survive on the ship and it was able to survive on that planet. But in terms of what other atmospheres and airs that it's able to breathe in, we don't really know what its capacity could be.
Yeah, and especially because there's the silicon skeleton as
Mhm.
well. So I don't know. I don't think it can breathe silicon, but it could indicate there's
Yes. Yeah,
something
it could be a
else.
very different form of metabolizing energy than what we do
Yeah,
that we require oxygen for.
I was gonna say, does that mean that it would breathe out silicon dioxide instead of carbon dioxide?
I guess it depends what process it goes through, right? Like we breathe in oxygen and breathe out carbon dioxide through the process of needing to break down food and metabolize
Hmm.
and create energy that way. But yeah, I guess it depends what it does to keep its body systems functioning, whether it even needs those same processes or not.
I was gonna say, does the alien defecate?
Oh, don't know.
Like, it's got to release like unused
And use waste.
waste
You'd think
products.
so, or it's just highly efficient in that it and I guess we never see it feed as an adult, right? So the adult is not necessarily going to have any waste to release. It's in
That's true.
as a parasite, it feeds in those juvenile stages that we talked about last time,
Mm.
but not as an adult. So,
Yeah, but then what's the point of being an adult
well, I mean, I guess
if it can't eat and reproduce?
well, you've got to be able to reproduce it. It lays the eggs, right?
Yeah, but then that's only the queen that we see. So I don't know whether that means that the other ones that we see are actually adults, or if we've got something like a bee or a termite.
Yeah, like a caste system going on where you've got worker females that are, they're adults and they're out there defending the colony or bringing in food for the young, which I guess in this case is
Mhm.
host creatures to be able
Yeah.
to be implanted, but they don't have the right in quotation marks to reproduce because of the colony structure. So yeah.
Oh, like all the alien, they're all just boss bitches. Yeah, because I couldn't really see any difference between the different aliens. So they could either be genderless or they're all female and the queen just lays eggs and is. But then I want to know how the process of a regular adult
Mhm.
worker alien becoming a queen alien. So would you mind walking through how that works in like your preferred eusocial insect?
I don't actually know much about social insects because I don't work on them. I tend to work on solitary parasitoids. I'm sorry, Nat.
I'll have a quick look. So it's pretty cool and pretty brutal how a new queen is chosen for a bee hive. Essentially, what happens is that as the queen starts to senesce and age, she produces fewer eggs, and this signals to the colony that it's time to replace her. So, nurse bees produce a gelatinous substance from their heads, which they feed to different larvae, and this is called royal jelly. So, these larvae grow into queens. But the brutal part is that you can only have one queen. So, the older queens will kill all the younger ones and then try to kill each other until there's one left. Kind of like Game of Thrones. I know Game of Thrones is pretty old and ended really disappointingly, but I've been watching House of the Dragon, so fuck it.
There's also there'd be cool examples of things like termites where
Mm.
I know at least at my house we get it a couple of times a year. It's like the perfect weather and our whole garden just gets filled with the flying alates. So it's the part of the reproductive cycle where you get all these winged termites which are exiting a colony and out to form a new colony. But what the process is from, with ants and bees and social things like termites, like how that colony actually gets started and how the queen actually becomes the queen, I don't know too much about.
How a queen is born.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of crazy genetics that goes in things like Hymenoptera, the wasp bees and ants, because we have diploid and haploid members in the different sexes. So you get things which have 2 copies of the chromosomes, and then things that only have 1 copy of the chromosomes, which does some funky things with the genetics.
So is that like the males only have, like the males would have 2 copies or 1
I
copy and
should
the
really
females?
know which way round it goes. One of them are diploid and one of them are haploid.
Editing now with the power of the internet to the rescue. The females are diploid and the males are haploid. If the egg becomes fertilized, it becomes female, and if it stays unfertilized, it remains male.
I should know which way round it goes. Because, yeah, it's a really, like, interesting genetic structure in terms of, like, who's actually related to who and how closely they're related to each other
Yeah.
in the colony.
I've never thought about inbreeding in the
Yeah.
in eusocial insects. It's like, ooh,
It's one of
okay.
those things I learn whenever I need to give the lecture, and then I promptly forget it.
I 100%, yeah.
Yeah.
I have learned the Calvin cycle so many times, and it is a mystery to me. I cannot remember anything. I'm like, "Oh, yeah." I can't even remember if the Calvin cycle is the, like, energy producing one or the photosynthesis one. Like, the Krebs cycle and the Calvin cycle, and I'm like, "It's a mystery.
One of
It's
them's
all
in
gone."
grasses, right? And one of them's in more advanced plants. I don't know. I vaguely remember first year
Yeah.
botany. But yeah, there's some really cool like reproductive strategies in insects. Have you heard about parthenogenesis?
Oh, yes, but maybe just explain.
Yeah, so that's maybe something else that could be happening with the xenomorph, where it's not related to the socialness or the coloniness, but it is related to perhaps there only needing to be one sex or one only females.
Mhm.
And we see it, for example, in some stick insects. And this is where the female is able to lay viable eggs and viable offspring without having to have them fertilized. So all of these eggs are
Mhm.
basically genetic clones of herself. So she's in the absence of a male, she's able to lay the eggs and they hatch out and they're perfectly happy females and they can lay their own eggs. But we get, yeah, it's basically a clone system there. It's called parthenogenesis, happens in lots of different insect groups. Some species will use fertilization when it's available because obviously that is better genetics and trying to
Mhm.
build up that broad genetic base in the offspring. But if there's no males around, she can keep the generations going by laying eggs by parthenogenesis and having
Mhm.
these little clones of her hatch out.
Yeah, I think that might be what's happening with the xenomorph too. Because also, is it correct that parthenogenesis can often be faster?
Well, I
Because do you have a more rapid capacity to increase the population because you're not limited by like the number of males?
Yeah, I guess you're not needing to find a male to mate safely and to have those eggs actually fertilized. So
Mhm.
that step is taken out of the picture. And I mean, with stick insects, those females lay hundreds and hundreds of eggs sometimes that are often all very successful. Of course, they are normally get eaten a lot once they hatch by lots of different things that are eating those little baby stick insects for food. But yeah, very cool mode of reproduction.
Yeah. I have spiny leaf insects and all of them are female, which is so annoying because I did have a male and he died. So they're all female from here on out. Um, but they're pretty cute. I've given them some fresh leaves and things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice.
Well, I think that definitely makes the xenomorph a bit more approachable, thinking about her as a stick insect. Ooh, here's another thing. So the queen xenomorph has extra sets of limbs. So what sort of, I don't want to say body modifications, but I guess body modifications would or work of females that have become, the queen.
Mhm.
What sort of changes could they expect in their body?
Yeah, I
They
guess,
get bigger, right?
yeah, and I guess it's quite different probably than the xenomorph in that in things like honeybees, the queen is often a lot bigger because she needs to have more space in her abdomen to produce eggs because that's her main
Mhm.
function. I mean, and there are some groups of insects where that queen can basically become immovable and has to be, cared for by the workers, and she's basically an immobile egg producing machine. Whereas the queen xenomorph clearly is still able to defend
Mm.
herself and defend her eggs.
Yeah, it was interesting that the queen was initially very immobile, and I wonder if they can maybe switch from a prioritization of reproductive output to prioritizing the body, because when we first see her, she's very slow and she doesn't really attack them, and she's hooked into this sort of organic egg laying tube. If you've seen the second one.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so I wondered if maybe she or the other workers, created a sort of organic external genitalia, I guess, of like this huge sort of tube-like system that she sort of is hooked into. But then when the organism itself is threatened, like she was with Ripley and the, what's it called? The fire thing. What are they called?
Yeah.
Flamethrower. Then she sort of extracts herself and it looks fairly painful, and then she's sort of more like a normal one and seems to have a similar capacity for speed and reflexes and things.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe she's, switching in and out of laying eggs and then stopping laying eggs to be able to defend. Definitely, like you said, she had extra legs, which is definitely not a adaptation or a modification we see in many different sorts of arthropods. Leg number seems to
Mhm.
be very conserved within groups. We go,
That's interesting.
yeah, like all of the insects have 6 legs, all of the spiders have 8 legs, and that just really, like, it's not like one lineage or one species within that group suddenly, evolves another leg, or a individual within a population often has extra legs. Occasionally, obviously, mutations happen and we see it, but we definitely don't see it as like a adaptive thing in a particular caste or something like
Mm.
that. I think because legs they require like a fairly major modification of the whole body structure, right? So it's not something that can, switch on or off
Happen
very
lightly.
easily. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any arthropods that would only have 2 limbs at all?
No, I don't think so. So yeah, insects have, we see 6. Things like spiders and scorpions and arachnids, we normally see 8. Crustaceans, we normally see more than 8. They often have a lot
Mm.
of appendages, but
It's
it's,
usually 10, is it?
yeah, often 10 in the decapoda. So in that group, there's
Oh
10.
yeah,
Yeah,
decapod.
yeah. It's always
Yeah.
great when the Latin names have have meanings we can spot. Um, but yeah, they always have several. We never see only 2 limbs. I'm trying to think of any kind of animal that we only see 2 limbs. 4 seems to be the way to go. I guess with 2, it's very difficult to move around.
Well, I mean, even if it's for and sort of biped. But yeah, I've never thought about why arthropods, why they couldn't just have 2 legs and be biped, or 4 limbs, because yeah, like in mammals and things there's so many
Mm,
things that all have 4.
yeah,
In fact, like almost everything, I think.
I think it's just a quirk of evolution.
So there are 2 parts to this. One was super obvious and we should have gone, and the second is more interesting. The first is that there are examples of animals that only have 1 set of limbs, such as dolphins and whales. So we really should have thought of that. The other is the extinct moa, which looks a bit like an emu that had wings that eventually disappeared. So in both these instances, these animals had 2 sets of limbs and then one became very small and disappeared. The second is that in 1951, someone called Erlis Lanham, which is a cool name, published a paper called Why Do Insects Have 6 Legs? And basically they proposed that for something very small with an exoskeleton and a pretty limited nervous system, having 3 sets of limbs always gives you balance by having a tripod type motion, a tripod type balance. Because these limbs are moving really quickly, they don't have the time to slowly allow themselves to balance like we could do as mammals with an advanced system. So for something very small with an exoskeleton, 3 sets of limbs are the way to go. The other one that makes literally 0 sense, but is very interesting, is like the double tongue. how it's got a mouth and then it's got like a sort of smaller organism or almost sentient tongue, which has applications. Yeah, the only thing I could think of in the real world is kind of like those. Is it a kind of fish? There's like a large fish and it can have a smaller fish that parasitizes it by eating its tongue and then it sits there as its tongue.
Yeah, there's those little crustaceans which will, basically eat the fish tongue and then sit there in the mouth.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, super
Don't get me
cool,
wrong.
super creepy. Yeah, I don't know.
So the real life parasite is a crustacean called Xenomorph, which enters through the gills of a fish and then makes its way to its mouth, where it basically eats the tongue and then becomes the fish's new tongue, just eating all the food that the fish does without giving anything to the fish. So maybe this is what is happening with our alien. Maybe there's a second alien, a hyperparasite.
Could be. Or it could just be something with really great muscle maneuverability.
Well, it kind of looks like it has a face and its own teeth, unless I've just extrapolated that. I'm just trying to think if there would be any evolutionary advantage as a large predator to then have like I can't say sentient tongue,
No, I mean,
seriously.
and having that parasite is like never good for the fish. And normally
Mm,
parasitoids are not good for the host organism. But it would be a really cool question. Does the xenomorph have its own parasitoids? Because most of the wasps that we see that are parasitoids, there's other wasps that we call hyperparasitoids that actually are parasitoids of those wasps. So,
yep.
what is the parasitoid of the xenomorph? That would be a cool spin-off
Yeah.
movie.
In case they don't have enough of a franchise
Yeah,
already.
yeah.
Is it usually within the same family
No,
of
often,
wasps, or is it a whole sort of another family that's adapted to be hyperparasitoids?
yeah, often different families. So, for example, the wasps I work on, they're in a family called Braconidae. And then we often have things from the superfamily Chalcidoidea that might be hyperparasitoids on them. But
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it can happen within the same family. It just takes
Right.
something adapting to that. And that's often how, those parasitoids and hyperparasitoids, when you're thinking about bringing in something for biological control of an organism, you've got to think about that whole structure of stuff. And do you need to, control the parasitoid with a hyperparasitoid, or are you just wanting a
Mm.
parasitoid to control the pest? But
Yeah.
yeah, now I've like got these cool ideas of, the hyperparasitoid of the xenomorph being
Yeah.
bred and released to control the xenomorph.
Oh my god, that'd be so cool. They'd probably fuck it up, and that would be
Yeah,
a
yeah.
whole new franchise because it'd be like the cane
Yeah,
toad.
yeah, find out it's
And then
not host specific and the
oh,
hyperparasitoid actually attacks something else as well.
look, that would actually be a cool but it would feel like such a bullshit
Yeah,
story though,
yeah.
because they'd be like, "Remember that little, like, tongue thing? Well, turns out that that's not," and then they'd have to build it all on, like, one snippet of, like, this tongue appearing, and that's it.
Yeah, it'd just be for the parasitoid wasp nerds to watch, really.
Yes.
Yeah.
You and the other community of researchers
Yeah,
be like, "Yeah, this is the best." Everyone be like, "This is whatever."
yeah.
If it is a hyperparasitoid, then how does it get in? Do you think it's been there since, birth, like inside the egg, or it's
No,
been introduced later?
yeah, I mean, I don't know about the tongue thing, but most parasitoids or hyperparasitoids will have to lay their eggs in the insect at some point. So they
Mhm.
may do it while the original parasitoid is forming a cocoon. So the quick recap is, the female wasp lays its eggs, say in a caterpillar, baby wasps eat the caterpillar, they come out, form a little cocoon, turn into adult wasps. So while they're kind of in that cocoon stage where they maybe don't have a lot of defense strategies, that's when the hyperparasitoid might come along and inject their eggs into it. And then that new wasp will start eating the metamorphizing wasp. Yeah. So normally it has to
Mhm.
be laid at some point.
I would be so excited if I saw a caterpillar and then, like, a wasp. How would you see either of the wasps, if you know what I mean?
If the caterpillar had already been parasitized and the first parasitoid had emerged and made cocoons, you might see one of the hyperparasitoids coming along and, inspecting those cocoons and injecting its eggs in.
Oh, so it would always have to happen after, because you got your caterpillar and then it's like, and then the the wasp larvae emerge and then they form their cocoons, and then that's when another hyperparasitoid could come along.
Yeah, often. Not always, I don't think. That's a hard and fast rule, but at least in the group I work on, yeah, normally when the hyperparasitoids will attack.
Are there many cases of insects parasitizing adult life stages of others? Because it does all seem to be related to like the larval
Hmm.
stages.
I guess it is often in the larval stages because that's when the host insect is the most vulnerable. So
Hmm.
often when once they're an adult, they have a very hard rigid exoskeleton, they have defensive strategies, and often adult insects don't live for very long. A lot of insects will
Mm.
spend a lot of their life cycle as in their immature phases. So if you're a parasitoid wanting time to be able to eat all the yummy insides, you're kind of better doing that when it's younger and you've got a longer time to be able to feed than, say, when it's an adult and it might only live for a few days.
And then you've invested all this in, and they're like, sorry, we're shut.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
This is totally a very random tangent. It's just what popped into my head. But it does remind me of the time when I had a 16th birthday party and we found this cinnamon donut mix that you could buy from Peter Van the Party
I
Man.
remember that store.
Rip Peter Van the Party Man. And we were like, this is so good because like it was just like flour sugar mix. You would add milk or water, form it into a dough, and then you deep fry it and it was a donut ready. And we just discovered this and we were like, yeah, this is great. And they discontinued it 2 weeks after we discovered it. We were so disappointed, but probably not as disappointed as a xenomorph. There you go. I tied it back.
Yeah, yeah, nice job. It'd be like a xenomorph laying its eggs inside, someone who then died before the chest burster could come out.
But I mean, John Hurt has always looked old forever. So that was quite a risk parasitizing John Hurt. Before today, I had a look at the synopses of Alien 3 and 4 because I was like, I should probably just see if there's any extra content.
Oh yeah,
And
the life cycle goes totally weird after the first two.
yeah, I've heard that, and that's why I'm hesitant to bring in additional
Yeah,
information
it
there.
kind of all changes because I mean I haven't seen them, but like you, I was like, oh gosh, I better quickly read a synopsis in case Matt asks me about this. Um, so I can't really speak to it, but yeah, it sounds like there's all other races that come into it and creators of the xenomorph and all this kind of stuff.
Oh god, that does sound like a handful. I literally just Wikipedia plot read that. But, and then I saw a really uncomfortable looking photo of the xenomorph with a penis because they were like, yeah, the original French designer of the xenomorph, when he
Mhm.
had the sort of hybrid ones that are meant to be like human and xenomorph, he was like, yeah, I wanted to give like, the genitals of humans to like indicate that it's a thing, and it's just really uncomfortable.
Yeah,
Like,
which also it makes no reproductive sense, right? Like you wouldn't
right?
have reproductive organs that you're not going to use as a parasitoid.
But I guess that could be like it could just be a dud hybrid, like
Yeah.
something like a zonkey
Yeah, a
or
bestial organ
oh,
that's,
yeah,
not needed anymore.
it just looks down, he's like, what is all this equipment that I don't need and doesn't work?" Yeah, I don't wanna think about a xenomorph
No,
shooting
no.
blanks like,
No,
oh.
moving on. I live across the road from a park, and there's somebody with ladders and traffic cones going up into the tree, and the only thing I can assume is they're trying to rescue something. Anyway, sorry.
Uh, no, no, I need to know more about this. Are they climbing up on a ladder? Are they just putting the ladder
I
in the
can't
tree? What are they
see. There's
doing?
like a group of people watching the ladders. I can't see the person who's actually up the ladders. It feels like the storybook
Mhm.
cat in the tree and someone's trying to get it down, but I don't actually know if that's correct or not. I'll keep you updated if
How
I.
old are the people as well?
Oh, it looks like a family that was just out for a walk at the park and they've stopped to watch. Yeah, I don't know. I'll keep you updated if anything happens.
I say that because in Scouts back in the day, because I was very, very cool, obviously, There were a lot of things with ladders. There was one called ladders and wheelbarrows where you would get dropped after being blindfolded with
Uh-huh.
a ladder and a wheelbarrow, and then you had to make it back to the scout hall without being seen by scout leaders driving around in cars. So like you'd see all these people hiding with wheelbarrows and ladders like in the bushes on the side
That's
of the road. Which is
hilarious.
why I was like, are they putting the ladder in the tree? Like, is this
Yeah, don't know. Back to xenomorphs.
Yeah, the xenomorph can climb a tree. That's why we were talking about
Yeah,
it. It was elaborately set up tangent.
yeah.
So it turns out that it was actually a beehive that someone was removing from the tree near the kids' playground. So it was relevant after all. Any final comments on the xenomorph before we wrap up?
No, just that I think it's just such a cool creature that has inspired such a massive franchise and also like exists in so many people's awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So many people who haven't seen the movie, you still go, that alien from that sci-fi movie, decades ago, and people
Mm-hmm.
still know what it is and recognize it, and it's just so distinctive and so the first thing that I think was in cinema that was so creepy and
It
had
was so
enough
good.
associations with, weird life cycles that we see things here on Earth, but completely different enough that it clearly was not from Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so cool that it was inspired by parasitoid wasps, and I'm glad that, there's still big connections to be made and to talk about it.
Yeah. Cool. So I forgot to do this last time, but we can do it now. So what I'll ask is if you could rate the portrayal of the xenomorph as a living organism that could actually exist in real life,
Hmm.
how would you rate it in terms of accuracy from
Uh-huh.
science fiction at a 1 to
Uh-huh.
science fact at a 10?
Ooh.
How viable it is as a real organism?
I mean, it's from outer space. It's an alien, right? So I feel like we can't put too many of Earth's rules on it. So I'm going to go maybe an 8. And the only reason I'm not saying it's a 10 is because of that weird fact that you almost have that alternating generations of the face hugger that seems to implant an embryo itself, which is just something very different that we don't tend to see in animal like organisms here on Earth, which seems
Mhm.
to be a very strange reproductive strategy. That's probably why I'll only give it an 8 and not a
Yep.
10. But otherwise,
Yep.
it seems super well evolved to parasitize things and be able to be a real thing
Yep.
that I hope I
Awesome.
never come across.
Yeah, I was going to rate it as I kind of like 8 as well. I think we also, as scientists, don't want to be too absolute and be like, it's 10, and then, you know, bite ourselves in the shoot ourselves in the foot, bite ourselves in the ass, whatever. Yeah, because I think that it's definitely got a morphology that we see in real life as like a biped type thing with a sort of scorpion stinger tail. Like these all do seem like viable options, and that the morphology for the most part tends to reflect the function as well.
Yes.
It's not just sort of a bullshit thing that's sort of there.
Yeah.
The face hugger is definitely, as you said, this thing that doesn't make the most sense. But also, I also feel like there's so many random evolutionary relics that don't
Yes.
make
Yeah,
sense. Like
yeah.
why we still have
Mm-hmm.
appendices, because that's just a dumb thing that we don't need. So that sort of life cycle form might have been more functional back in the day, but now it's sort of reduced to something that's a bit of an inconvenience.
Yeah. And it does work well with its host, right? It's a great way to be able to get the chest burster into the host without the
Mhm.
adult xenomorph having to be involved. So,
Yeah.
yeah, works well.
And the other issue mainly is the difference in size between the chest burster and the adult alien. I'm like, do you have hollow bones? Where is all this volume? Like, where is all your mass? But anyway, I think 8. I agree.
Nice.
Thank you so much for joining.
No
Is
worries.
there anything else you wanted to talk about in terms of cool papers or science things? You talked about the insect investigators
Yeah,
last time.
yeah. Check out Insect Investigators if you want to hear more about the work we're doing with schools to find new species. Or you can follow me on Instagram if you want to learn more about entomology and what it's like being out in the field catching parasitoid wasps and hopefully not getting turned into an alien.
Yep. And what is that Instagram?
It's at Erinn_FJ. Erin with
Yep.
2 N's.
Well, thanks so much, and I'll see you next time we talk about things. Bye.
Thanks, Nat. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Type 1 Error. This podcast was created, edited, hosted, researched, and produced by Natalie Brown, and the music is also by me. The excellent cover art and logo is by my sister Alexandra Brown. This podcast is currently non-monetized, and so the best way to show your support is to rate, review, and subscribe to Type 1 Error wherever you listen to podcasts. At the time of recording, Type 1 Error is available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Podbean. Reviews are really important to establish a new podcast, especially since it costs me money to produce episodes. You can also engage with Type 1 Error on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the links in the show notes, or join the Facebook group, The Type 1 Errors, for community and episode discussion. For questions, feedback, or episode requests, email me at type1errorpodcast@gmail.com with the one spot with the number, not the word. Remember to keep your curiosity every time you consume your popcorn. See you next time.